questions, but thanks for joining our webinar today. Today we're going to talk about architecting for high availability and optimizing infrastructure spend. This is an introduction to Liquid Web's private cloud powered by VMware and NetApp. So before we get into it, let me give my introduction slide. Kelly Goolsby. I am Director of Enterprise Sales and Solution Architecture for Liquid Web. I've been in the hosting industry since the early 2000s, working with all types of customers, all types of products. And so part of my role at Liquid Web, besides solution architecture and products, is working with our product department and product teams on what customers are asking about. That's everything from enhancements to our cloud, processor enhancements on dedicated servers, next-gen technologies, and we did see coming up a lot as I talked to customers, VMware. Coming up is a question people are asking if Liquid Web could support a VMware private cloud. So after some research and talking to a lot of customers, we decided, based on some feedback and some data, to launch a VMware private cloud offering at Liquid Web, which is what I'm talking to you about specifically today. I do have a passion, by the way, for helping small businesses succeed. I think Liquid Web is uniquely positioned to still be a company that's flexible to customer requirements, customer asks, and since in the year or more I've been here, I've seen us develop features, products, and enhancements based directly on customer feedback for customers of all sizes. So we will dig into the presentation. My email right there, kgoolsby@liquidweb.com. Feel free to find me on LinkedIn. Happy to discuss anything, right, from VMware to databases to containers, right? Happy to talk about any of that. So we will dig through the presentation here. I did want to talk quickly. Everyone who's been in hosting and IT for a while knows about the evolution of hosting options. Sort of started out, in the 90s with, or before, with colocation. Instead of building your own giant data center or campus, people bought colocation from a telco vendor, got an empty rack, leased servers. Interestingly, VMware really in the early 2000s capitalized on that market, mostly because the ease of configurability, right? The ability to configure a virtual server remotely on hardware. You don't have to go out and consistently rack a new server. So VMware still is a very strong player in the in-house and colo market. Liquid Web actually started as a dedicated server company. Obviously, have evolved since then, but took colo to the next level, which is, the server was leased and provided. Companies like Liquid Web and others sort of made their mark with managed hosting, right, to support the software stack, operating systems, and things on top of those servers to provide more value than colo, which is progressively a commodity. Forgive me, I'm monitoring on my laptop as well. Part of that industry, when people wanted a lower cost of entry, you sort of took shared hosting and melded it with dedicated servers with some early technologies going all the way back to FreeBSD. You're able to carve up virtual private servers or VPSs, and they've been around, and Liquid Web is very strong in that market. We have a thriving VPS business and then a public cloud, but VPSs sort of, became really, really dominant in the mid-2000s, late 2000s, first decade of 2000s on the market. And obviously VPSs, and not to minimize what our hyperscale public clouds are, which now have a huge and growing, consistently growing market in the high double digits, but Amazon Web Services, Azure, and Google Cloud Platform are really very sophisticated VPS systems. Obviously a lot of networking, storage, PaaS systems, things bolted on. But at the end of the day, they are using the core technology that powers VPSs. We think, and the market shows, that private cloud is sort of a mix of all of this, right? If you look at some of the benefits from each of these in control, in security, in isolation for workloads, and in having some of the scalability of public clouds, obviously not the same, we think that private cloud still is a unique and growing market, and there are a lot of products on the market, but VMware is really sort of the most mature of all of those technologies. And we will talk about why Liquid Web chose to build our kind of entry into the private cloud market on VMware and NetApp. So to talk quickly about private cloud and where it optimizes for efficiency and security, you can take a look at a diagram here. So some of the benefits obviously are an isolated infrastructure served by dedicated hardware. And so what you see here is NetApp storage, and there's a lot of different ways to do this, right? A lot of different storage vendors and a lot of different storage models for private clouds. But the key of VMware is the efficiency of a private shared storage backend shared between the hypervisors, served by dedicated storage nodes. And that, again, representative diagram here, this could be any number of nodes past 2 as you scale out a cloud. And then we take, for VMware, it's vSphere on top of ESXi hypervisors, and then carve out any number of OS instances, Windows, Linux, different apps hosted on top of those. And then the technology obviously can get very sophisticated on top of that. But what we're talking about today is our entry into the VMware private cloud market. We'll go into a little bit more about why we chose that and the benefits that you'll see from VMware private cloud. So again, I'm going to actually expand our questions here and see if anything has popped up. Not yet. So we haven't gotten too far in. I do expect we'll probably have some questions before the end. A moment here. So the four areas I want to talk about today in our decision process on VMware and NetApp are because of the uptime that we can achieve for customers based on these tried and true technologies. The scalability that in particular for some of our clients gives them the ability to scale, obviously not auto scale like public clouds, but a measured scalability that is very predictable is another benefit of our VMware and NetApp public cloud. And then performance, right? There are a lot of different ways to architect this. We could have used local storage. We could have used some of the next gen hyper-converged storage that is big in the VMware market if you go to a VMware show. But because of the two requirements at the end, we wanted this to be easy to use for our clients, and we wanted it performant. We chose to go with a architecture of VMware backed by the latest all-flash NetApp, and we can get into more specifics later. This is not a deeply technical webinar. It's sort of an introduction. We're happy to bring our engineers on. Maybe in another series we'll do a more technical webinar. So moving forward, forgive me, I talk rather quickly and get excited about this. So to talk about how VMware ensures uptime and performance, we have a diagram here. And if anyone is a VMware administrator, this will look old hat to you. But if you're not familiar with VMware and some of the technologies that are unique, other private clouds are just starting to gain some of the maturity of VMware in its ability to ensure uptime and performance. So the advantage and the reason Liquid Web chose to do a redundant multi-hypervisor HA configuration for VMware is the concept of live migration resource pools in VMware HA, which we see represented here. Sort of this diagram before you had a failed server would have shown 3 hypervisors, or hosts as we call them, all running ESXi, and then vSphere, the management plane, across the top of those managing the cluster. What this cluster does is takes all of your compute resources, CPU, storage, obviously abstracted and passed from the NetApp, memory, and then virtual interfaces, and puts them into a resource pool. And then our engineers, when we design a VMware solution, will help determine sort of your initial balancing and how many VMs will go on each machine. But everything is shared or is shared from the storage of the NetApp. And so what VMware does in a failed server model, so if you imagine this diagram, we would have had essentially 2 VMs running at any one time across the 3 hypervisors. If a server fails, for whatever reason, our physical server fails, network card, whatever it is, kernel issue, anything like that, this is actually VMware HA. The disks of those machines running on the SAN will be preserved. You will have a brief interruption while your VMs essentially reboot onto the continuously operating hypervisors. So essentially, you would have had essentially 2 VMs here. One would move to each of the remaining ESXi hosts. And so this is sort of the magic of VMware and the way it ensures uptime from unplanned issues, right? Like a server failing. Can get much more sophisticated if, one of the advantages, and we'll go into in a moment, is deciding to take a server out of rotation and using live migration. I mentioned this is something that other hypervisors and private clouds are just starting to perfect. For a couple of versions of VMware, the ability to do live migrations and deterministically move VMs between hosts has sort of been the secret sauce of VMware. So forgive me a moment. We will dig in a little more here. So to talk about how we engineered LiquidWeb's private cloud, our reference architecture is designed from top to bottom for high availability. So we have a redundant public and private network so that access to the SAN, access between hosts, and access out is fully redundant. We are starting with a design of at least 2 clustered hosts, as you see right here. Highly available SAN storage. Again, NetApp presenting that SAN. And then all the vSphere sort of software that allows for the flexibility of live migration, the flexibility of vMotion. That's resource pools, as I mentioned, DRS, and then vMotion, which actually could do the live migrations or restart a VM after a failed host. What we do like about, and if you look at the VMware ecosystem, things are getting much more advanced with software appliances and hyper-converged storage. And I think at some point our product will evolve to that. But again, walk before run, and we use VMware and have consistently internally. But to make it available to customers, we wanted to start with something that works for our customers where they are today. So if you still have application availability strategies at the application, at the OS layer, those are still available. So to our customers, the way you consume VMware looks very much like you would dedicated servers today. We're just managing all that availability, storage, all of the physical networking, all the virtual switches, all the things that set you up for an architecture that fails gracefully when you do have a failure, that allows for maintenances to be non-impactful. We're managing that for you, and that product will certainly evolve over time. So again, I'm going to slow down a little. If there's any questions, please feel free to put them in chat. So we do talk about high availability, and I think more today than ever, it is important. I don't think in my 15 plus, 16 plus years of doing this, I've ever talked to a customer and said they welcomed downtime. But we do know that 3 major things or facets of downtime are important. vSphere HA, as I mentioned, protects your VM resources from server failures in the cluster. Hardware replacement SLAs are good. They're great, really. This industry has pushed, when I came into the industry, 4 hours for hardware replacement was fairly common. The LiquidWeb SLA is 30 minutes. But we all know that getting back to an operating state certainly takes longer than the SLA just to replace failed hardware. And VMware HA allows for rapid recovery from outages, just a reboot. So that's first. Secondly, and it kind of goes along with scalability, is planned downtime, right? And you truly can, with VMware technologies, plan your downtime. As I mentioned earlier, vMotion and correct cluster management allows us to move VMs between hosts to do maintenances. That could be maintenance on an individual host. It could be maintenance to the VMware control plane, upgrading ESXi versions. We are designing with additional capacity on the hypervisors to allow scalability and to allow us to do rolling upgrades, right, for updates. The third, and what in the last 2 years has become ever more evident, is increasing hardware vulnerabilities. I think probably everyone in technology is aware of Spectre and Meltdown, which came late 2017. Last year we had another variant of Spectre and Meltdown. Some forecasts are that we'll have several dozen more hardware vulnerabilities in the next few years, and no hardware is guaranteed to be immune. I know going through reboot cycles with customers and especially on public clouds, that's one of the things that you do give up in almost any public cloud is control. When you're doing updates across a very large infrastructure, it's hard to exempt customers because of the scale of the updates that have to happen in the patches. In a VMware environment, we obviously do give you control, just like our managed services on when we do those. But with this, it's even easier, right? If there's an emergency patch, it is pretty much trivial to move VMs between hosts. Live migration, when you do that, and I think I did mention it earlier, actually captures even in-memory information and makes an incredibly graceful move of VMs transparent to use. So we can do emergency patches, and they become much less impactful. So again, high availability, we think it's more important today than ever. As more and more business moves digital, there tend to be workloads that are capturing more and more revenue, and uptime is more important. So we do know that our private cloud is designed to allow for scalability. So you can add guest instances on demand and spin them down when they're no longer needed. One thing that's important in VMware, when my architects architect, we normally recommend starting small on VMs and scaling up. However, if you know exactly the resources you need, CPU, disk, and memory, we can obviously start there. But the latest versions of ESX and newer operating systems make hot adds incredibly easy. This is a managed offering, so launching instances today is not an access we're giving to customers. We do expect that to be a follow-on later, but in order to manage cluster resources, manage oversubscription, and resource utilization, Liquid Web will launch instances for you. But you can also create a gold image that has software stack installed, and we can use that image to scale quickly for you. Again, on scalability, and an architect will help in initial design if you choose to look at this offering to size appropriately. But we do allow you to add individual resources to host, right? If you just need more memory or just need a little more CPU, obviously you can add that. Because we are using a centralized SAN storage, as opposed to some of the hyper-converged that you'll hear about, it makes it really easy to just add storage when you need it instead of having to rebalance a cluster for hyper-converged storage. So we talk about ease of use and centralized SAN, even though it's not the where all the buzz is today in VMware, we think it offers unique value. Often, though, we're going to recommend that you grow out, right? VMware resource pools work much better when they're spread across more machines. This is something that the Liquid Web team will help you with in analyzing TCO to see if it makes sense to scale individual nodes or to add more nodes that would increase your durability across a larger cluster. Because this is a managed offering, we'll monitor cluster resources and provide a consulting solution architect and an engineering team to advise you on growth plans and options. We do advise to build for current and initially future growth, but we do know that you don't want to oversize initially because compute constantly gets faster, more CPU cores, things like that, and you're able to spread your instances across higher performance hardware. Finally, or a little more, not finally, we're not at the end yet. VMware and NetApp, this design was for performance. There are a lot of different ways to crack the private cloud problem. You'll see people that run shared host machines in their environment and then spin up dedicated VMs for customers with VMware. We firmly believe that dedicated host machines prevent noisy neighbor issues and ensure consistent performance. It's one of those things you have to think about in the public cloud, and you might end up auto-scaling, which has gotten easier, but sometimes you auto-scale or throw instances at a problem when you just need to ensure performance based on consistency. Our managed VMware offering with Liquid Web's helpful humans are available to troubleshoot issues on host hardware as well as guest machines. So this is a managed offering from the underlying infrastructure in SAN through the virtual machines. We do have some options for unmanaged VMs if you're interested. Again, the NetApp is all flash. Some of the bells and whistles of other solutions and some that I've engineered in the past will use things like auto-tiering to move virtual disks between slow and fast storage. That's great if you have a lot of data and you're able to build the algorithms to know what your performance needs are. Based on the decreasing cost of flash storage, we decided this solution should be all flash, much simpler deployment methodology. You don't have to worry about things like auto tearing. And we are connecting at 10 gig to ensure fast storage access speeds. And our model is designed to maximize TCO, but provide high performance for your guest workloads. So some workloads, and everyone asked, and I would say it all depends, and we will help if anyone is interested in evaluating a particular workload, either at Liquid Web today or in-house or at another provider. But obviously, VMware grew. In fact, numbers just came in, and they're growing at 12.5% still. So VMware is still, it's huge market dominant technology. It's used, across lots of servers for internal IT. So we know internal IT is a target market. Windows servers for in-house functions, accounting servers, terminal servers, file and print servers, domain controllers. Because those machines normally take fewer resources and hardware is easy to buy with lots of RAM and CPU, we see it as a great play for server consolidation. Obviously, VMware is fantastic for mixed workloads, Windows and Linux servers. If you'd like to mix production, dev, and test and isolate those, we can do that. We do see a lot of our web professional, web dev types using VMware to spin up small servers for individual clients and have some consistency in those. And then, depending on the software as a service, obviously, if your super bursty workload need to scale, a public cloud might be a better option. However, for most smaller SaaSes or ISVs who build out a stack for individual clients, VMware tends to be a great time saver and a great use of resources. So these are at least three of the workload areas we see a lot of traction for VMware today. And then ease of use. To talk about this briefly, and I think I've mentioned it throughout the presentation, we do not require a major re-architecture like you might need to do in any public cloud. Availability happens at the hardware layer, but you can still use traditional load balancing, firewalls, and other security and availability technologies because this is a very known sort of quantity. If you're not using VMware today, or if you are and just want to avoid the VMware learning curve, we configure and manage the environment for you. And as I mentioned, we will be looking at various new VMware technologies. I don't think NSX is new anymore for microsegmentation, but it is one of the products we will look at adding at some point to this environment. You don't worry about licensing cost. I know, like anyone or any company, you're consistently evaluating licensing cost at VMware. If you don't have a relationship, it can seem expensive. Our licensing is built in. One requirement for this product was a clear-based price, no unexpected overages or licensing increases. We can talk more about, I don't think I have particular packages yet in this presentation. One interesting differentiator, we are not charging for individual guest VMs other than licensing and add-ons. So everything is built into the underlying commodity price, so you're not penalized for having a lot of small VMs, right? Our packages kind of go from 5 to much higher, but that's sort of a guideline. Our base package for 5 VMs could easily be 10 for certain customers who have smaller VM requirements. So probably could have scheduled an hour and talked about this, but I know we're running toward the end of time. Again, if there's any questions, you have my email. We can follow up after the webinar. Put them in chat. We will be sending out, after a couple days, a copy of the presentation. I don't recommend listening to me in double speed. I talk fast enough. So we did cover the technical aspects of a private cloud environment and why we think it is still a product that has a lot of traction in the market. The benefits that we are deriving for our customers from utilizing VMware and NetApp. Some of the essential use cases for a HA environment. How we can increase ability to scale quickly and easily. Some of the performance considerations, and there's a lot more that an architect could go through with you for a private cloud, and some of the ideal workloads for a managed VMware solution. So my contact information, again, happy to email you, give out my cell phone number as well. And then additional resources, there's a blog post now. This is on our website under private cloud. And then more information to come, some use cases, some case studies will be coming out over the next few months. So I don't think we have any questions. Looks like I covered everything. So we do have a question in chat. So what type of migration options are available? Let me expand that. So initially, our migration option is to set up a clean environment, create the OS images, and then a logical migration over. That is certainly not the only option. One of the benefits to VMware is being able to move the actual file systems, the VMDKs that would live on the SAN. That may work. There are some intricacies to re-networking those machines, to removing certain pieces of software. So what I would say is, again, we're flexible, and that's an option we would consider if you already have a VMware environment running somewhere, and we're able to work with we'll probably work with a professional services engagement that would help move those. But again, that would be something we would consult on. The easiest way is obviously to do a logical migration. The only thing that I would say is not off the table, but we'd really have to look at is what's called a P2V migration. And I know it can be done to take a physical machine and then create a VM file system out of that. Those tend to be a little more problematic even than a VM to VM migration, but it's certainly something we could look at. If anyone is using other VMware sort of migration technologies in the market that do backups and migrations, happy to look at those as well. They do a lot of the heavy lifting of moves. There are a lot out there. Let's see. What are the best customers types of infrastructure you're seeing as a good fit for VMware? Again, so I would say people that have bought machines probably larger than they need for particular use cases. We also know that a lot of our clients, because of paying for individual servers, might be running dev and test and things like that somewhere else and then replicating those environments. Because we're not charging for individual VMs, we think anyone who has hesitated to move other workloads over because of that individual VM cost, those would be great for the Liquid Web VMware product. Like I mentioned, we're seeing a lot of traction from ASVs, ISVs, right? Anyone who builds out a packaged software for a client and then needs 2 or 3 machines to deploy it, that deployment model becomes easier on VMware. So I would say all of the 3 I mentioned initially. I would also say that we've not done VMware before, so we consistently talk to people who have an in-house VMware deployment that is aging, and so those would be great. I have a third question. That's a loaded question. Are there any VMware features that Liquid Web is not offering at launch or will be offering in later release? There are a lot, right? VMware they launched, initially I think VM Player and then ESXi. There are a wealth of features now. VMware actually has their own sort of enhanced private cloud software called vCloud Fundamentals, which uses vSAN, which is hyperconverged storage, NSX for microsegmentation, vRealize automation for automated deployment. Those are all fairly sophisticated, and we do see the use cases for those are really large private clouds. And I think we will be adding those one by one. Some other things, Horizon View, VMware's virtual desktop environment is always gaining market share. Today we don't support it, but a client could certainly bring over Horizon View workloads for VDI. And then, it comes down to will we support, VDI supports different, and it's kind of gets into some who supports what when you're talking about end users. But as far as the infrastructure for Horizon View, we can definitely do. I can't go through the whole VMware product catalog today, but again, we've enabled the core technologies, ESXi, vSphere, dedicated vCenters, I should mention, for each client. That was designed, to give us the ability to tailor for individual clients instead of having a shared vCenter for all of our clients. So it gives us some flexibility to iterate for individual clients. So yes, I would say we were willing to consider almost anything in the catalog that makes sense. But we did want to, the initial offering is something tried and true that we have a ton of experience with and know we can enable for clients efficiently. So thank you. I think that covers all my questions. So appreciate everyone's time. Sorry to rush, but we did hit just at 30 minutes with the questions. Again, feel free to reach out to me via email for specific cases, questions, use cases. Happy to help. Thanks, everyone.